Greetings and welcome to another Unity tutorial video. This one is a direct continuation off of the progress bar tutorial video. So if you haven't done that one or followed along through on that one yet, I would highly recommend going back and looking at that one. And again, this video is primarily geared towards my prototyping students, but anyone is more than welcome to join in on the fun here. Alright, so again, just as a reminder, prototyping is all about answering a question. You have a specific question. Is this mechanic as fun as I think it is? How should these things be balanced against those other things? Is this even technically possible? You get the idea. And of course, in a prototype, you want to focus on the bare minimum amount of work you need to do in order to answer that question. You don't want unnecessary work, because one of the pillars of the other pillar of prototyping is that it's all junk. You are throwing away everything. To enable speed and to make sure you don't have any really nasty bugs following over because your coding was rough as heck. But you don't want it to be so minimalistic that it distracts from the question. And there could be a reason to add some visuals in. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm just going to add in some quick visuals to give a rough approximation of how these buttons would actually look in the game, because I'm not going to have this, odd half-sky view in the actual game. No, I'm going to have scenes. I'm going to actually be looking at trees and rocks or whatever it is I'm going to be looking at in this theoretical clicker game that we're doing here. So, as I mentioned in the first video, I do have some pre-loaded asset packages. Specifically from the standard assets, I have environments and prototyping, although I won't be using prototyping in this video, I'll be using environment. And then later on, I will be using the Necromancer GUI package, which can be downloaded for free from the asset store. And there's some modifications we're going to have to make in there as well. All right, so to start off with, like I said, this is going to have some nature scenes to actually go with the buttons. So I'm going to create a quick terrain, so 3D object terrain. I'm going to switch out of 2D mode, zoom in on the terrain, although apparently it didn't zoom in very well there. I'm just going to do some real quick, just sort of really rough, broad stroke stuff. So let me yoink that up to max. Let's see here. And I'm going to, actually first, I'm going to put textures on here so I can actually see what I'm doing instead of this sheet of ice. Unity, please change this default, please. Alright, so I'm going to add in my grass as my base texture. So grass hill albedo. I usually like saying my grass is down to like 7, even for something like this where it doesn't really matter too much. Then I am also going to add in my cliff texture, so cliff albedo. I'll bump that one up to 25, just good general starting point values for these things. And then I'm also going to add in the grass, the rocky dirt, so grass rocky albedo. And set that one to 10. Add that in, and now I can see a little bit better what I'm actually doing. Okay, so going back over terrain, I'm going to bump that opacity back up. I try to get some sort of roughish mountain shapes in here first. I'll just sort of look in this little corner right here. So, and then maybe rough it up a little bit, turn that down. Okay, let's zoom down in here. Oops. Okay, and I'm getting that weird zoom in error. Again, I've never really been able to quite trigger this kind of error at will, because I should be able to get really a lot closer to this terrain than what I'm getting right now. And so the best way of handling that is I'm going to put my mouse cursor over the terrain and hit F to focus, and that F to focus on terrain is aggravating. There we go. See, now I can get closer. That's still not really what I wanted. F is supposed to bring you in closer on terrain. And again, I'll be honest, I haven't exactly figured out what triggers that to behave itself properly. One thing that does almost always work is plopping in a cube and focusing in on that. Notice now I can get right up close. I can get right onto the terrain now, which is what I wanted. All right, so I want to be able to get a decent shot here that looks kind of foresty. There we go. All right, so that'll be good. So grab my main camera, lock into that view. Let's see here, probably smooth some things out just real quick. Probably spend a little bit more time than I should. I just love playing with terrains. All right, that's nice and, let's see here, relaxed. Actually melt things a little bit here. That's just my personal terminology for it, is melting. Look back here. Okay, and then probably will rough back up this. Oop, that's too strong, way too strong. And let's bring that brush size down a bit there. I just want that to be a little bit more rocky looking on my view. All right, and relax it just a tiny bit. I have found generally after using some of the harsher brushes, you do need to relax them a tiny bit, otherwise you get very sharp corners, which tend to not look right. Okay, so that's enough of shaping the terrain. Slap down some quick textures here. Am I getting? Okay, I'm not getting my highlight bar for some reason, or at least if I am, I can't see it. But I am selecting this, make that pretty much. I'll start off the base layer with just real quick rock. And see here, slow down this. Maybe on some of the ridges there. I'll have to come back and fix some of that. Let's see here, take my target strength down a bit there so I don't overwrite my rocks. Get some layering going in here and switch back to that. There we go, close enough. Oops, no, not 2D. So go back to my game view. Okay, and so add in some trees. Edit trees, add. Let's see here, I guess I'll do broadleaf desktop. Remember you have to regenerate your materials on these. Oh, heck no, not that big. You need to regenerate your materials on the trees. It's pretty simple. You just go into standard assets, environment, speed trees, go into the tree and select the tree and click on regenerate materials. You don't always have to do it, it seems like, but it's a good idea to do it because otherwise sometimes you'll get some really weird effects on the leaves. So that's a good idea, just sort of a standard thing to do. So, okay, so I got broadleafs. I'll add in some conifers too. Add tree, conifer. There we go. Try to add them in where it makes sense. And probably I should have some, oops, lost my trees. Have some added in here as well. Okay. Oh, so here, can I see all the way up there? Not really, so maybe over in that corner. And just because. There we go. And okay, that probably need to add in a nice big clump over off to the side here. So All right, so go and get back to my trees. Doink, 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 doink. Get some conifers in here. I'm not sure this is an actual good mix of trees or not. Okay, that gives me a nice amount of trees. And just for the heck of it, toss in some detail objects, so grass textures. I don't like this default tinting. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that in. I don't like that default tinting because it looks really weird to me. I don't know. Your mileage might vary on that. But, oh, right, I'm in the game window. Your mileage might vary on that. I find that really makes the grass almost look cartoony with how bright and green it is. So I always like bringing these tints back down to maybe just barely visible tints. And I find that to work a lot better. And of course, grass is one of those things where kind of got to be careful with how much you put down or how fast you put it down, because it can go down really fast. Okay, and then just do a quick hit on the play button here, make sure everything looks okay. I mean, yeah, I don't think this is going to win me any level design of the year awards here or anything, but it gives me a good visual approximation. Actually, you know what I think I am going to place in a tree closer to this, some trees like right in here. Just so I have something a little bit closer. But again, the point behind this, I'm probably going a little bit too far, is having something that will give me some, give me some visual approximations on how this is going to look. Okay. You know what? I think I just might reposition my camera. There we go. That looks like a good shot right there. So I'll just reposition the camera rather than fool around with that anymore. Okay. So now I've got my scene set up. Now I want to actually place this button in a spot that makes a little bit more sense. So maybe move it off to the right a little bit. And by the way, let's see here. How much time did I spend on that? The video is at 13 minutes. That includes some introductory chattering. So yeah, 10 minutes to slap something together. It's not an unreasonable amount of time to put a little bit of visual polish on a prototype to try to get a better feel for things. But now the problem I have with positioning my button is if I zoom out my canvas so I can see my button, I can see my keep in mind this is like 500 meters. So I can see my terrain down here, my little patch of forest, but I have no way of seeing in this screen the visuals of how that's going to look. And so what I do in this particular case usually is, I'll shrink this over a little bit. I'll grab my game window and toss it over here. And so now I can see my scene and my game at the same time. This is where having, in the previous video we set this is where having this aspect ratio is critical. Because if I didn't have this aspect ratio set, the ratio of how big this window is would be completely different, and it would completely mess up my ability to push the button, or place the button. So I'm going to grab my button, and not move it because I'm not paying attention to my widgets. Yeah, it's right there, sort of in the middle of the trees, right next to that big one that's in the camera. And so I think that looks pretty good. All right, so now if I hit the play button, I can click on it. And we see the other severe error that we currently have in our UI layout. Where's my wood counter? I mean, I can see it here, clear as day. If I look over here, yeah, you can't really see it. So that's another problem. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back to the canvas, and at the root level here on canvas, I'm going to add in a panel. And all a panel is, honestly, is a pre-configured image. You could do this exact same thing with an image element and just do a few steps. But what it is it's an image that already has the background sprite set to it, and the opacity is set down some. It's a little bit low, a little bit below 50%. 50%, of course, would be 127 for 50%. So it's transparent. And that's all it really does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reposition this off here in the corner. I'm also going to change the anchor point. Currently it is set to a size be relative to the size of the canvas. I don't want this, I want an absolute size, so change the anchor point to the upper left. And then I can take my text and my text amount, make them children of this. That step's important, otherwise that won't visually look correct. And drag this over, and I should probably make this panel here a little bit larger, so that way I can fit this in, and maybe shrink this panel down a bit as well. Now, instead of being anchored to the upper right, I'm actually going to change my anchor to the upper left, which, remember, this is now referring to the panel, not the canvas, for these anchor points. And then I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that'll work for my positioning. So if I, now you can see this is much more visible. And drag this over. And now when I hit play, because of this being on that faded background, I can now actually see the text. So this, just a little bit of sprucing up, adds quite a bit more life to the prototype and makes it a little bit more, I guess I shouldn't say more enjoyable, but less tedious to play. Having something that is just a solid background, having something that, let me break that, having a screen that looks like this is more tedious to deal with as far as, you know, actually focusing in on things. Whereas something like this, it's, you know, it's okay to look at. Better than half the things on Steam Greenlight. I probably shouldn't say that. I'm going to leave that in there anyways. I'm not a particularly big fan of like 90% of the games on Steam Greenlight. 10% of them, by the way, just so that I'm being fair, like there are games on Steam Greenlight that just look absolutely amazing, and I really just hope those developers make it. And it's just the vast majority of those games, I'm like, what, why, no. I'm getting flashback to Newgrounds. So, yeah, it's a mess. I should stop rambling about that. Okay, so yeah, it has a little bit of visual detail. Now we can add a little bit more visual detail, but this is sort of a good breakpoint. If all you were really here for was the, you know, prototyping and sprucing things up, this is actually probably a good point for you to break off and stop watching the video. Because what I'm going to show next is trying to use the Necromancer GUI UI. And I don't really want to make a whole separate video on this, which is why I'm picking it back off of this. But there's some issues with that, mainly because it's a legacy system, and it's not as smooth as you would think to integrate that in. So when you're looking at things to integrate into prototypes for a little bit of visual flair, you always have to keep in mind how much work is it going to be to integrate this into my prototype. So let's take a look. If I go into the Necromancer UI, first things we'll notice, it has a Necromancer GUI component. This is the old legacy GUI standard, so that if I was creating my GUI elements in code, which is what you used to have to do, it would pull all of this information here to create the buttons and text boxes and things like that. So I've got the button expanded out so we can see here, you know, what the background is, what the text color would be, stuff like that. So the old system was okay, but it was a massive pain. The new system is so much better. But the problem is that all of these UI elements in this package were designed for the old system. So let's take a look. So if I go into controls, and for the moment, actually, you know what? Let me create a new project tab up here so we can see this a little bit better. I go into controls, make sure that my icons are as large as possible. And so we have all of these various little icons, but a problem, or not necessarily a problem, but the thing to keep in mind on most of them is there's a lot of white space around these, and that can cause some interesting things to have happen. So let's take a look at this window here. Take a look at it. You can see there's plenty of border space around it. And this looks like this would be perfect for our little inventory screen. So maybe come in here to our panel. Let me switch back to the scene 2D. And so maybe on this panel I have an additional text object here. Actually, let me drag these two down. That did not mean to change my pivots. So, stop changing the anchor point. So I'm going to center this on, I guess it doesn't want to be centered. Let me remove, stop changing. It's really annoying. If you grab this pivot point, it'll cheerfully allow you to move your pivot point for this, which can be a good thing. There we go, centered there. I guess it's not going to give me the option to center it. Okay, I'll stop fiddling with that. So I'll bring that down there. Link those two back up together. Add in a new text panel here. Make it best fit and say inventory. Okay, now sometimes Unity does this little corruption thing. I'm not entirely sure what triggers that. Usually switching windows or doing something to force it to refresh will fix that problem. Okay, and center that on there. Okay, so this window right here would be a perfect place to have something like this. The problem is I can't add that in. If I try to drag this into the image here, I get a denied symbol. And if I look at this in the inspector, we see this texture type is editor GUI and legacy GUI. That's not what we need. What we need, we have to have this as a sprite, 2D and UI. So I'm going to go ahead and change it to a sprite, click apply, and now I can add that in. And it comes out okay. There's a couple of issues here. One, this bar up here at the top is really supposed to be a label area. I mean, I should be able to have that be a label, but it's not right now. Now, the other thing is, of course, it's faded out. The faded out part's easy. We just come in here, grab our alpha value, and crank it all the way up, and now it's not faded. Trying to fix that is a little bit more interesting, because this image wasn't really designed with 9 slicing in mind. So I bring up the sprite editor. Let me drag it back off of the second monitor there. And get some extra space here. So there we go. So what 9 slicing is you alter the borders to create 9 quadrants. The corners don't get scaled at all, the horizontal pieces get stretched, and the center gets tiled. So let's see here, right? Let's just have these be equal here, at least as best I can. Top 100, and let me zoom in. Looks like I'm 2 pixels down there. Okay, looks like those are the same. So this is 9 slicing. So the general idea is these corners will not be scaled at all. They'll be used as is. The horizontal and vertical pieces get stretched as needed, and then this center piece, just stretched in one direction, mind you. And then the centerpiece, I think I said tiled earlier, which is a misspeak. This gets stretched or shrunk as needed. So it's done by modifying the borders. Click apply. Where'd you go? There you are. Now this won't impact it if you're just using it in simple mode. But I can change this to sliced mode. And you can see now how I've got the corners now are really clear and everything, but I actually need to stretch this out. I need to make it a lot bigger than it originally was in order for this to look correct. If I have it too small, it doesn't really look quite right, especially once I start getting this white center part in here. So I kind of need to stretch that out to the point where the white center isn't quite so obvious. If I come over here, it's still a little bit painfully obvious on that patch there. Now I can potentially try to fix that by modifying my borders, but the larger I make these corners, the other issues I can start running into. So yeah, this really wasn't designed with 9 slicing in mind. The other image mode that I can try on this is tiled, which again, this wasn't really designed for that. Can also try filled, which that looks a little bit cleaner. But filled is basically simple with the ability to do that, which doesn't make any sense. So simple looks like it's really the best if I want to sacrifice this little bit up here. So again, I would position my inventory like, say, right there. And then position this down like so. And we've got some other like visual flare elements that we could put in. You know, so we've got this spike. You know, we've got these spikes in here that we could put in, perhaps. Or this label image to like use as a underline or something like that. But again, I'm going to have to modify things a little bit to get that to work. So here are the other things that we can do to try to spruce this up a little bit. Make the button match. Now this button, the button that it includes, absolutely does not work. This button is not designed at all for this setup. So if I try to switch it over, well, you can kind of sort of make it work. It doesn't work out the best. I guess I shouldn't say you can't make it work. You can, but it doesn't look all that great. Okay, so I've changed it over. Come over here, link it in. So if I can zoom in, you can see it doesn't really look all that great. This does have transparency information built into the image, so there's only so much I can actually do about the transparency. I can make this look a little bit better by tinting it. Doesn't make it look much better, but I can make it look a little bit better. And then I can modify the text, modify the offset, so that way it fits better on the center of the button. And I can also change the color on this to be a more solid black as well. And possibly change the font type as well, because they do have the additional fonts in here that I can put in. Reposition that a little bit. And so there we go. We've got, it's not, like I said, you can make it work, but it doesn't really look all that great. And so on and so forth. You can like potentially use this label, actually is reasonably easy to use as a progress bar. So I'll go through this one, and this will be our last touch-up that we do. So I'll change this to sprite, apply. I'm not going to make this one tiled or anything like that. I'm just going to use it in simple mode. I'm going to come to my background and set this as my background. Zoom in here a little bit, and I think, not tiled. And I mean, it stretches out a little bit, but there's, only so much that we can do about that. This one especially is not set up for 9 slicing because, as you can see, there's no real place for me to 9 slice it. I think you can actually modify it a little bit for tiling. Random thought, so I'm not sure actually if this is going to work. If I pull over the borders, because these do impact tiling and such. Where's apply? There it is. I'm used to having this on a separate window, so the tiles and the apply button is in a slightly different spot. All right, so I can come back over here then. Nope, you. And see here, simple tiled. Nah, no, that's not going to work. Sliced, of course, still doesn't work very well. Because again, this is not designed for 9 slicing at all. So one last thing on Sprite Editor. You might be able to fake it by basically setting it so that these pillar things here, these button things, are the stretched part. So apply, go back to the scene, and it looks okay. Yeah, tiled is still completely borked. So we'll just leave it with simple. I mean, again, we're not going for super, let me change my scale back to 1 here. And that, is better than a plain white bar, if nothing else. Again, the primary point on this is to show how it might seem like a good idea to use something like this, but it can have, oh yeah, that actually looks a little bit better if I pull it up. Let's pull it back down. It might seem like a good idea, but there can be some issues with it. Okay, so on this, I'm going to need to reposition this actually quite a bit, because I need to shrink the size on this so that it fits in here. Now, this is still all relative, and honestly, at this point, I have probably horribly broken all of my anchor points, all of my scaling, so that if someone tried to view this on something that wasn't a 16:9 ratio, my UI would probably break at this point. That's okay. I'm not that concerned about it for a prototype because I know I will never change off of that 16:9. You would want to have a slightly more methodical approach for an actual release game. All right, so that should be enough wiggling about. Hit the play button. And there we go. Again, I don't think this is going to be getting me any Game of the Year awards in terms of artistic quality or vision or anything like that. But it gets the job done, and those few little pieces of visual flair do add to the prototype. So, now I can see, will it be distracting to have this wavy grass, right in your face as you're clicking on buttons? And if I was going to have, shifting from camera position to camera position, I'd be able to see how well does that work. Or actually, I would probably even do an entire prototype on what would be the best way of handling shifts between, harvesting wood and, say, going up closer to the rock face and harvesting rock or mining for metal or something like that. Okay, well, this concludes this tutorial video. So until next time, take care.